Hey, everybody. My name is Matt Smith. I would like to welcome you back to another edition of On Authentic Leadership with the Colonel and the Coach, along with my co-host, Kim Ellsworth. And today, a very special guest, Brian Daliege, comes to us from Williamsburg, Virginia, through a dear mutual friend. If our listeners remember, Bart and Michelle Weed of Tailwinds Ranch. And Brian, we'd like to welcome you to the show today. And thank you very much for taking the time. We know that you're a very, very busy man.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. So just for context, just for folks that are either listening or watching, Brian again comes to us through a friend recommendation. However, when we look at his background, it's firefighters, it's environmentals, engineering, and and everything in between. So today the conversation is going to be fast paced because it's going to be moving along. And kind of before we get going, Brian, what we'd like to do before Kim and I start asking questions, if you could kind of just take us through just a little bit about what made you you, in the sense that, some of the experiences that you may have had. We know you spent some time out west, and of course now you find yourself in the Hampton Roads, Tidewater area, doing a lot of environmental engineering stuff, as well as a fire chief for James City County Fire Department. But there's a lot to go after there. But if we could just hand the proverbial microphone over to you for some context, we'd really appreciate. So over to you, Brian.
Yeah. First of all, I appreciate the field promotion. I'm just a captain, not a chief.
Oh, okay. All right.
But no, it's a different pay range, man. But no, I grew up in the Williamsburg area. Been here kind of my whole childhood. Grew up locally. One of two kids. Working class family. Kind of grew up. Very blue collar family. Dad worked construction. My mom just kind of did various things throughout my childhood. Yeah, always had a passion for being outside. Always had a passion for being hands-on. Went to school. It kind of doesn't go without saying. School wasn't easy for me growing up. I definitely had to earn every grade I got in school. So I think that when you talk about what forms you kind of as a person, that gave me kind of a grit that not to kind of take failure to heart and to keep on pushing forward. So got through school, was severely dyslexic in school, so that was always a challenge. When I got in high school, they told my parents I would be the best I would ever be would be an equipment operator or possibly working for a trash company. And so, yeah, I went through that, and that kind of gave me the determination to tell everybody. It's kind of my personality to tell them, like, just stand back and watch.
Right.
So yeah, I did that, got through school, ended up going to college, and ended up studying environmental science. Fell in love with it. Fell in love with that aspect of it. Did a lot of consulting forestry work, and with consulting forestry, I got into a lot of prescribed burning. And we were burning about 2,000 acres a summer. And then I found out I could get a job just putting out wildland fires. So spent some time out west, did some wildland firefighting out there. I always said that when I met a woman, I would stop doing that kind of stuff. And I met a woman and got out of it. Yeah, I worked for the Virginia Department of Forestry for a while as a wildfire hazard mitigation specialist, which is just a big title for post Isabel, doing a lot of post Isabel fuel management. It was a big hurricane we had that came through here that destroyed a lot of forested lands. So that's brought me back into the environmental world and did environmental work, a lot of wetlands work for a long time, and then started my own company. And with that, like anybody else that starts their own company, you're always up at night wondering when the next contract's going to come in. And my neighbor at the time was a structural firefighter, and he mentioned, he was like, "Yeah, you've done fire before. You ought to get back into it." So yeah, I applied for Newport News Fire Department. Was hired with them as a firefighter. I was like 300 and some applicants for 25 spots, and I fooled them into hiring me. And spent some time there, was there for about 5 years, and then transferred to James City County Fire Department. I'm there for 6 years now, and I've been an officer for almost 3 of those 2.5 years of that time. And yeah, and I still run an environmental consulting company. I jokingly tell everybody I'm every 7-year-old's dream that I ride fire trucks and play in the woods for a living.
That's
And
perfect.
yeah, I love it. It's a good balance, man. I like we talked on the phone. I think it's really healthy to do something totally different than what you do when you do jobs like military, police, fire. You can oversaturate yourself in that stuff. I think it's a good balance to get out and do other things.
Hey, Brian F. Yeah, thanks for that. Wonder just if we could maybe go back and on the fire side, talk a little bit about maybe your time out west. And I think there's a lot of people, like what kind of time frame were you out there? And secondly, there's a lot happening with fires now. Like, was that something that was raging back then, or?
No. I was out there. It would have been 2000, 2001, 2002 timeframe. I was 20, 21, 22 years old. Things were totally different then, man. We actually had a fire season back then. Fire season went from May to early October, and then it was kind of over. What we're seeing now out west is that it's a year-round fire season. I mean, the fires don't go out anymore. That's a lot. There's a lot of reasons as to why. One of the big things they taught years ago was it became the 100% suppression campaign from Smokey the Bear, right? So only you can prevent forest fires, and only we should put all of them out. A lot of the fuel reduction burning that we do now wasn't done then. So you had areas of forest that had gone a long time with a lot of fuel load that are starting to burn. And really and truly, by quote unquote preserving the forest at the time, we were actually hurting it long term, because when those fires get in there, it's just literally it's a tinderbox. It's 12 inches of fuel on the ground just ready to rip. Much kind of like where you guys are, the fuel composition out there, it's a lot of coniferous trees, a lot of spruce and that sort of thing. The properties of that type of wood and that type of tree are conducive to burning pretty quickly with all the terpenes.
So when you talked about like your fire season and you're wanting to get out, like
Mhm.
what obviously watching from afar, and we get reports where we're at in Vermont, and I'm sure other people do, of the smoke and different air
Yeah.
quality and things of that nature. What was the actual day to day? I mean, what you do now and what you did then probably very different, even though it's under the same fire
Yeah.
umbrella.
Yeah, well, it's actually not, man. I'm not even supposed to be a structural fireman if I talked to my 22-year-old self. There's a little bit of a competition there. No, your day-to-day life when you're out west is you're spending all day on line somewhere. You're sleeping in a tent all summer. Sometimes you'll do a 14-day turnaround. Sometimes you'll be out there for several months. But you're sleeping in a tent. It's very much like the military, right? So you get deployed and they put like a forward operating base somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and you're sleeping in a tent, and everybody's going to one collective spot to get fed, and you have a logistics bureau there to get you boots and pants and shirts if you need them. And then you're going back up on the hill every day and doing your 12 to 14 hours, digging line and then going back. The interesting part is I think it's a lot more documented now, and it's a lot better for the guys doing it now. It's a lot healthier, I think, because we didn't have iPhones then, right? So, and cell phone coverage and texting and social media and all these things. When you left then, you were gone. Every time I was out west, there would always be a guy that it never fails. Everyone's grandmother dies, someone's deathly sick at home, all these things. But really, it's the first time a lot of these guys have been away from home and not been able to call home. Overhead has a sat phone at this point, and that's about it. And it's not there for you to use as a ground pounder. And I'm sure you saw this a lot in the military. A lot of times, it's the first time some of these guys have been away from home, and they get homesick real quick, especially if they're from a real small town, haven't been anywhere, haven't seen anything. And which is very different from my life now. With the fire service that I'm in now, going back to drawing from the two, you're gone for 24 hours, but you get to go home every day, and you can call your wife, and kids can come by the station, and the whole 9 yards. It's two yes, they're under the same umbrella of fire. It's two drastically different worlds. Wildland fire is a chess match where, structural fire is more of a trying to break through the line of a football team. You're just hitting it with as much water as you can, as much people as you can from all directions. It's more of a I guess it'd be more of the battle, and Wildland fire is more of a war, I guess is the way to put it.
Brian, just pulling on that thread just a little bit from a Vermont perspective, like Cam said, we had an exceptionally dry summer. I mean, we were under whatever the darkest of the dark red conditions is before it kind of goes to the black. That's where we were.
Right.
I mean, they denied fire permits all summer long, and in fact, recently, they've been denying those as well. I just want to get your perspective on, is that just like a you problem as somebody who's just, who is in like an environmentally focused, or is that like a we problem in the sense that if times certainly have changed, what are the things that we can do just to be aware, like the royal we, you know what I mean? Like folks that are listening to this, or
Right.
folks that care. Similarly to me, I would obviously care about whether or not my house burnt down. Cam cares about whether his house burnt down. But when you look at Vermont is made up of, sugar bush and all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
it's amazing. And it's a livelihood, right? I mean, I just read an article this morning that talked about Vermont is the number one producer of maple syrup in the country. So, you're competing with the
Right.
likes of Maine, New Hampshire, upstate New York, Massachusetts, and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, to a certain extent, Michigan as well. But just wanted to get your take on how global should we think with regards, to this, and
Yeah.
is it truly a problem, or is it a made up problem?
So you can go one step further in the livelihood for Vermont being the maple syrup capital, because you talk about an industry that's based in the woods, right? So as part of my duties when I was with Virginia Department of Forestry, and that like the wildfire hazard mitigation guy, I was administering a program at the time called Firewise. And what the interesting part is, during that point in time, all the fire, so it's called an urban interface, right? So it's where the wildlands meet the urban area, right? It's where the houses are. It's your backyard if you live next to a forested area. So there was all this literature that was coming out at the time about defensible space and wildland urban interface and how to build firewise communities and firewise neighborhoods and that sort of thing. And it was centrally based around exactly what you're talking about, is how do we defend ourselves from this stuff? So a lot of it comes down to like fuel reduction programs. A lot of it's just manual labor, going in and just removing down trees, dead debris, all that kind of stuff from around your house or around your business. God forbid you had a syrup farm that, you're running those lines everywhere. I think it is a global thing, and I think one of the problems that you face with it is silviculture, right? So silviculture is the art and science of managing forests, and one of the things that we've veered away from, it's kind of a detriment of its own characters, is everyone has a vision of forestry being just the rape and pillage of the land, and you see cutovers that have no trees in them and that sort of thing. But there's a lot more to silviculture than just logging and supplying the paper mill with pulpwood and the sawmill with 2x4s. There's a lot of forest health that goes into it, a lot of spraying that goes into it, a lot of commercial and pre-commercial thinning, a lot of that kind of stuff. And the more that we urbanize environments and the more that we fracture our forested lands, the more that we are creating spaces that are unmanageable. And when you have an unmanageable space, it's no different than that unmanageable pile of stuff that comes in from the mailbox that sits on your counter in your kitchen. It just keeps building up until one day either someone throws it all in the trash and gets rid of it, or someone takes the time to go through it and say, oh, wow, the dentist office sent us a check for $50 that we paid too much. That's great. So I think that's to answer your question, it goes back to urban forestry. Without urban forestry, you are going to create a larger problem, because your fuel loads are building. You still have active stakeholders that want to be in the community, as well as in the urban interface and the wildland interface. And as long as they're humans, they're going to be doing what humans want to do, and that's going to be campfires and s'mores and all the things. And if you haven't had a managed forest structure, then yeah, you're gonna leave yourself open. You're kind of just dumping puddles of gasoline everywhere, if you will, hoping they don't catch on fire.
Thanks, Brian.
So, Brian, not to get too personal, but you said you met a gal, you moved back east.
Yep.
A little bit, maybe just family life and getting you back east.
Yeah, I mean, I came home. I was home a lot. I was so it's a huge lie that you don't meet your wife at a bar, because I did. And so yeah, I met my wife, and yeah, I met her in February, and it just ever since then we've been together. I have two amazing kids. We've been blessed with two great children. Thatcher and Arbor are my two kids. Thatcher is he'll be 16 in March, and Arbor is 12. She'll be 13 in June. And awesome kids, truly awesome kids. Both of them, I named my daughter after a tree. I named her Arbor. So, and then Thatcher's a great kid, loves the outdoors, big into hunting, big into fishing. Jeff, for me, Bart, has spent tons of time with Thatcher, has aspirations possibly to become a pilot in the Air Force. Yeah, just great. But yeah, we live here. Have a house, a black lab, and two vehicles and two kids. I think I'm holding up my end of the U.S. Census for being as plain as they come. But and then yeah, I'm fortunate to, like I say, with the fireside, I'm fortunate to serve the community that I live in. And I think there's something to that. For me, it's serving in a multitude of ways with the fire service as well as the environmental stuff, and then some of the volunteer work that I do.
Brian, to do the stuff that you do with regards to the fire department, I mean, there's a lot of qualifications that you guys must not just achieve, but you got to maintain.
Yeah,
And I would imagine that you're still EMS qualified, right? That you still possess some qualifications in that regard as well.
yeah, I'm a paramedic.
Yeah, so you're full paramedic and structural fire, all that sort of stuff and whatnot. I
Yeah.
guess just when you hear, a fire truck or folks responding to just an event, there's an assumption that and maybe that's just the luxury of, in some cases, living in the right community, living in America to a certain extent, that someone's going to be qualified to do what it is that they need to do. And I think that's something that I don't take for granted, but I know it's something that Cam doesn't take for granted. But I just think, again, short of the confidence that we have in all of you guys, can you just talk a little bit about what it takes, to get to that level? And I know I promoted you earlier, but just from a fire captain perspective or from an EMS, because some of those folks are young, and yes, they haven't necessarily been to college, but I think there's a certain amount of trade emphasis, if you will, that I think we could place on some of our younger generation, that it's okay to pursue those professions because they are professions, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so can you just talk to that a little bit? Because I think it's exciting, and I think that I spent an entire Air Force career about achieving and maintaining qualifications, and it was hard. And I just think what you guys do is special, and I think that if you could talk to that, I think we have some folks who would appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna start off your career kind of having to figure out who's gonna be the best of who we pick. It's when I got hired with Newport News, I was, like I said, and this is not to sound whatever, but I was one of 26 picked out of 300 and odd some odd applicants. So you're already kind of starting out like, hey, you better be pretty squared away. So and then from there you get rolled straight into it's very much like a boot camp situation where you get rolled straight into fire academy, and that's going to be 16 to 19 weeks of every day showing up in the morning, working out. You're going to spend the first part of the day doing classroom, learning about the history of the fire service, learning about skills, learning about ladders, learning about how things work, learning every aspect of the didactic part of the fire service, of the lectures and that sort of thing. And then all afternoon, you're going to be in your gear and you're going to be doing hands-on. You're going to be learning to search, and that's the interesting part that I think a lot of people forget is everyone has the perception of, crawl low under smoke and that you're going to be able to see. But when you go into a house fire, you can see if it's really hot, but by and large, you're doing everything in the dark. So you're learning to search and limited to no visibility. You're learning to do a lot of things with your hands that you can't see while you're converting someone's harness to be able to rescue a downed fireman. So that's going on every single day. And then, once the academy's over, you get a night to feel good about yourself. And the very next day, you're going to go sit into, and it goes back to not everybody goes to college. This day and time, I'd say the majority of fire departments, if you're a paid department, you're going to college because you're going to end up going to college level EMS classes. You're taking anatomy and physiology. You're taking cardiology classes. You're taking all of these classes so that you can show up and show out, essentially, because no one calls 911 expecting the second stringer to show up, you know? And the interesting part, and this speaks to the coach side, you're essentially building a team where cuts were made before the first day of practice. We don't have the ability to cut somebody midway through. So that's truly to keep developing on that. So you go to the fire academy, you go to medic school, then you go to the floor. Okay. Your career doesn't stop. Just like I'm sure the military was for you as well as for college sports. Just because you make the team doesn't mean you get to stop practicing. So that's really when the leadership and the mentorship and really rounding out and honing your craft comes into play. I know for my crew, we train no less than an hour every single day. Every single day we're putting in an hour of training, either fire training or EMS training. And it's mandatory. It has to happen. And then we're constantly getting hit with new EMS protocols and new ways of doing things, and there's always a way to be better. There's always a way to streamline things. And that's, as an officer, that's one of the things I'm constantly looking at, is how can we be better than we were yesterday? And what can we do to better streamline our service for the citizens so that we can get from them identifying the hazard to us mitigating the hazard as quickly as possible. So yeah, and it's and on the other side of that is we have all kinds of certifications. We have, CPR, CLS, advanced cardiac life support. We have pediatric life support. We have PHTLS, which is, a lot of your pre-hospital trauma classes. All these certifications that we have to maintain throughout the course of our career every single year. So it's a lot. You can't have one foot in the door really to do it.
Yeah, you got to be committed.
Yeah.
Again, thank you for doing that, and I have a tremendous respect for the fire department. My uncle was a full-time fireman that retired, and my dad was a volunteer. My uncle, or one of my cousins, is still a volunteer. And I was just you talked about your volunteer service, and I'm sure we'll get to that, but just, I don't know how your exact spot works, but in our little towns, we have a lot of people that are volunteer. And so something happens, and before that truck can go anywhere, they got a bunch of people scrambling to get to the fire department, and they're electricians, they're mechanics, they're doing other jobs that are then putting together and helping these communities in this volunteer capacity. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit just about guys like that, gals like that it's not their profession per se, but you really stuck with me, the 911, and you don't want the second stringer showing up. Like, these people have and you talk about meeting your wife in a bar. Like, one of my buddies, electrician in town, like, if he's on call, like, there's certain, there's things that people that take for granted, I guess is what I'm saying.
Certain freedoms, if you will.
Correct. Yeah. And if you could just maybe pull on that thread and talk a little bit to that group, whether that's, again, in your department or in what nationally.
Yeah, I think, there's more volunteer firemen than there are paid firemen. We know that's a national statistic. The department I work for, we're technically a combination department, but we only have one volunteer station, and we staff that station with paid personnel. The volunteers are kind of there with our paid personnel. But then you go to more rural areas, you go up north, and like you say, you have a lot of volunteers. Yeah, I mean, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think it would be really hard for me to be a volunteer and an electrician. I think there's a lot to learn and a lot to know and a lot to have your hands around all the time as a professional fireman, that I don't think that I personally would have a hard time embracing as a volunteer. But that's part of my personality. I'm not saying that I speak for everybody. I think the volunteers that are in these small towns and county and rural areas, they have a large job. You're starting off behind the eight ball. Paid department, we have the benefit of being able to sit kind of on go, ready for the tones to go off, ready to show up. Where if you're framing a house and your pager goes off, you got to get down off the roof. You got to get in your truck. You got to drive across town. You either got to go pick up an engine or a tanker or a ladder truck or whatever, and then finally make your way to the call. But you're already behind the eight ball. A lot of bad stuff can happen in that 10 to 12 minutes of response time. And that would be on a good day. I have a friend of mine that he lives in Gloucester, and it might be 18 minutes between getting the call, getting a truck, and getting to wherever the call is. So it's hard. I think it's hard. I really wish that every municipality could afford to pay firemen to do their job, whether in a part-time or full-time status, because I really believe if you have the mindset to do it and you're truly dedicating yourself to doing something like that, then you really should be paid for your efforts. Either in a full-time capacity or part-time capacity. I really believe it takes so much out of you to do it that I really think you should benefit from it more than just a blue t-shirt. But the guys don't require that. They just want a pat on the back and a thank you, and I think that's what makes them qualified to do it. It's a selflessness that goes along with it.
Brian, I think Cam's question was awesome, and I was thinking through a couple different scenarios as he was saying it. And I live in a town. Cam, remind me, Northfield has a paid fire department, right, Cam?
I don't know if we maybe have one. I know we have a bunch of volunteers.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know some of those volunteers in Northfield just from but as Cam was asking that question, Brian, I was thinking my heart was skipping a beat a little bit because we in Montpelier we have an amazing fire department, and I know that the assistant fire chief, just a incredible, talented human being, one of the funniest people you ever want to meet, and I know his level of dedication, and there's a little bit of an urban rural context going on with the Montpelier Fire Department as an example. But I guess what would your message be like? What would you want someone to be aware of, not necessarily from a cry wolf perspective, but just what awareness would you want people to have? Because I know it's easy to say fire department, we just think fires, right? We think structures, we think all that sort of stuff. But like what I think of, just from my own personal experiences, I think about you coming through the door as a emergency medical service technician who is exceptionally proficient at what you do to address a medical situation. That's not to say I don't think about the fire stuff. I do think about the fire stuff, but sometimes, I don't know, maybe more often than not, it's the medical part of it. But I guess what would you want someone just that doesn't have the luxury of, the grand fire department that responds in a certain amount of time and can get there? Like just what awareness as a fire captain, somebody who's been EMS qualified for, I guess, almost nearly 20, what would you want them to be aware of? I guess what awareness would you want to bring?
For the public?
Yeah, just for the public. For someone that's listening, it's like, oh, I live whatever 20 something minutes away from from where I think the services might come from. Like, what would you want them to know?
I think that the biggest thing is that we are coming in. We've been trained to do our job, and we're coming in blind. We have the only information we have is whatever is on the screen inside the truck before we get there, and it's two things. One, let the patient answer the questions, and two, just bear with us. That's it. Just understand that you called us. We're there to help. We are there to help. We're going to help you in any way possible we can. We're going to ask you a lot of dumb questions. We're going to ask you things that you think aren't relevant, but are very relevant to us. It's kind of like when I can only imagine when you're going through like an engine out, checklist in a jet. There's certain switches that don't make sense, but they might be really important to you, but they don't mean anything to anybody else. Doing a solid assessment for EMS is the same exact thing. Some of the things that we're worried about, and it's really interesting, different people that are in my life that have watched me do what I do, and we'll be out and about and see an ambulance pull up and you'll watch a crew. When you're in the middle of it and you call 911, you don't realize that everybody's actually doing something different. Everybody has a job. You have the attendant in charge, the AIC on the call is kind of leading everything. One of the things that I do, I'd like to get into it somewhat because my management style for the fire service is a little different. It's kind of unconventional, but I'm big on not micromanaging my crew. My medics, do your medic thing. I am not there to tell you how to do your job. You're more than qualified. My job on calls, I'm there to mitigate hazards on the scene. I'm there to make sure dogs are put away. I make sure that there's no weapons in the room. I'm there to coordinate how we're going to get this patient out of the house. I'm there to figure out if there's any larger things. If the paramedic is doing paramedic level stuff. The BLS provider, the medic driver, they're doing a lot of basic skills, but we're all doing something different, and we're not ignoring anybody. We're just doing our job, and we're trying to get you the quickest way possible to definitive care.
Brian, do you want to maybe just pull on that and talk a little bit about that management style and
Sure.
A little bit about that leadership?
Yeah, I think for us in James City County Fire Department, we have a couple of different levels of, you're a fireman, and then after you've been there for about 4 years, you can become an acting officer. And then once you're an acting officer, then you can become a captain, and then you work your way up to battalion chief. And I see a lot in the fire service is really good at taking somebody that has never been taught how to be in charge and telling them they're in charge. I think that's one of the things that we could learn better from the military. The military has a lot of leadership schools that you have to attend and that sort of thing, where the fire service likes to just let you make it up as you go. And that's not always the best thing to do. There's a lot of toxic individuals that can work their way up the food chain, and there's not a lot of checking that goes along the way to make sure that we only have leaders in good positions that want the best for their people. I'm a very big proponent of, I've had a lot of experience outside of fire, with environmental consulting and that sort of thing. I was at the management level in an environmental consulting company, and I run my own company. The fire service loves to pretend that it's different when it comes to people, but people are people. People want to be respected. People want to be treated well. People want to be to have their best interests at heart, and they want somebody to go to the carpet for them. The fire service loves to eat its own. We love to find the weakest person and just prey on them and damage them as an industry. And that's a global thing. And that mindset is changing. That is an old school mindset of taking a kid, a 19-year-old kid that just got out of the academy, and then chastising him for not knowing how to start a chainsaw. Well, not everybody grew up on a farm or grew up in a lumberjack household that learned how to operate chainsaws and cut grass every day. What did you do to teach them that? Kind of one of the things is um, that I look at is I give everybody a room to do their job, and I'm very focused on, I know where we're starting and I know what I want the end to be, and I don't really care how we get there in the middle, as long as it was done safely and as long as it was done with respect, as long as the outcome is favorable for everybody. That's how I want to get there. That's how I want to do it. Yeah, I like to let my people kind of figure out how they want to get there. I think it's very micromanaging. There's more than one way to do a job, and as long as we can be efficient at it, I'm okay. If you want to go around the left side of the truck and I want you to go around the right side of the truck, I'm just kind of a pain in the butt to work for if we're got to do it my way all the time. So I leave my people a lot of room to work, and a lot of my management style is I'm just there to keep you between the ditches. Like the more that if you clamp down on somebody and make them do the same thing that you want them to do the way you do it, when you steal someone's individuality is when you have kind of stolen their willingness to want to work for you, I think. And I'm also a big proponent of being open. I told my crew when I first got promoted, I have a pretty big open door policy, and this doesn't work if I'm the captain and I'm always right. That doesn't work well, because it doesn't work that if I show up and whatever I say goes and everyone says, yes, Captain, that's a great idea. At some point, excuse the term, but at some point, I'm going to shit the bed. I'm going to do it on a call. And it's okay if you want to come back after the fact and come in my office and look at me with some kind of tact and say, what was that? Like, where did that come from? And I think having that level of respect and relationship with your crew in any profession, again, the fire service isn't special. People are people, but being able to have that level of honesty with your people is where it's at. And I think in the fire service, we don't have a lot of that. I think we're getting better with it. I think we really are. I'm not sure if the military is kind of the same way. I've never been in the military, but this only works when I'm wrong too. It doesn't work when I'm always right and everything else is everybody else's fault. You got to accept ownership from it. I had a battalion chief that when I got promoted, the battalion chief I initially worked for, Jason Sweet, he said, just so you know, anything that happens inside of these four walls is he said, doesn't matter whose fault it is, it's your fault. At the end of the day, you're who I'm coming looking for. And I think that's a sobering thing. I think more people in leadership positions need to embrace that if the crew fails, we fail. And my first question needs to be, how did I fail that allowed that individual to get to that point? Because if they failed, that means I failed them long before they had the opportunity to not do what I wanted them to do. So pretty much I look at it as every crew failure is on me. How did I mess up?
Yeah, Brian, I think really appreciate that. I think I feel like, not that we want to be old and yell at the clouds, but there's been some type of a transition to, it's your fault and not what could I do better or how do we accomplish the goal together. And I really appreciate that. And I will say we want to leave you a little bit of time to talk about people of like Mr. Sweet there, but just wondering if you could, we have some young listeners, we have some older people, like you are in your current position, get somebody that's new. And you talked about them earlier and said, hey, maybe they don't know a chainsaw, or like maybe there's that multiple year age gap. How are you connecting with a new generation?
That's a really good question. I love getting young people on my crew. I'm blessed to have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old daughter so I kind of know as much as dumb dad jokes will get you. I kind of know, I can speak their language a little bit, but no, I love getting a new guy. New guys are great. And really and truly, I tell whenever I get a guy that's brand new, they always hear the same statement out of my mouth is, you should be smarter than anybody in this station because you just got out of the academy and learned the latest and greatest ways to do stuff. You should be teaching us stuff. They're for everything that I can teach you, you should be able to teach me something because you just got out of school learning it. I went through the structural fire academy almost 12 years ago. There's a lot that's changed in 12 years. It's been on me to stay current, but if you don't stay current, I know how we did it 12 years ago. There's 1,000 ways that have changed since then, and you just spent 10 hours a day learning the latest and greatest way. Outside of that, I'm a big proponent of, the new guy needs to understand where he fits in the world. And I sit him down and I tell him, on your first day of work, your first 6 months, I don't expect you to know anything that we didn't teach you. I really believe this day and time, those new guys, again, this isn't germane to the fire department. When you're new, you should relish in the fact that you are given a free pass to mess up. And the biggest gift that we're given is, if you mess up today, no one's going to remember your mess up if you recover from it tomorrow well. It's the whole, like fail long, fail short thing. What's going to stop you and what's going to ruin your career is when you can't admit that you messed up. It's when you want to sit there and find 1,000 reasons why this didn't work because ... It's a lot easier to go, yes, I messed that up. And no one's going to care about it tomorrow if you come in tomorrow and you say, hey, we want to throw ladders again. Hey, I want to force the door again. Hey, I want to search again. Hey, I want to pump the panel again. I want to pump the truck again because I messed it up yesterday, but it's not about how you mess it up, because we're going to mess up. No one's expecting you to be perfect the first time out of the chute. It's like plays, the first time you run a play, you're not going to have it down right. But the only thing we remember of is that guy that wouldn't run it the second time because he messed up the first time when he was embarrassed. Well, no one cares about being embarrassed if you're willing to get up and do it again and again and again and again until you get it right. Then you become just a good dude who wants to put the work in for your people. That's what you're known as. You're never known as a failure if you fail, as long as you get back up and want to perfect it after you failed it. That's what makes you a good dude. And that's I think that's a lacking perspective that a lot of our young people globally have today. And I attribute some of it to social media, and I attribute kind of the lifestyle they're forced to live, is that once it gets written down on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, it becomes permanent for them and they can't get away from it. But it's all about how you recover from that failure. It's all about putting all that stuff behind you and growing into being that good dude. And I say dude, female or male, dude, general speaking. But I have a young lady that works for me that I'll put her beside any guy because she played college softball. She has perfected the art of failing and recovering, And I think I cannot stress that enough, is it's not about failing. It's about how we recover from those failures.
Brian, that's incredibly well said. Again, normally as we end up here, again, thank you for your time. Would love to just give you the floor to, think about somebody like yourself doesn't get to this point without help, without guidance, without mentorship, without support. And if there's some people that you want to publicly give that thank you to.
Yeah, I mean, I when I got promoted, I sent out text messages to certain people that were influential in my life. It's interesting that you realize people that you didn't like at the time were influential to who you are today, right? There's guys that I don't really even care to talk to that have been super influential in my life just because they taught me either something about myself or they taught me a way that I don't want to do it. I think that's just as important as anything. I've worked for some great chiefs. I've worked for some great managers. I'm in the environmental industry. I'm super fortunate. The chief that hired me, Robert Kraft, he hired me in Newport News. He left Newport News and went to work for James City County. And now I work for the man under him again. He's always been there for me. My fire chief has been supportive of me. I've worked for two of the best battalion chiefs I could ever ask for, which is Chief Pettingill and Chief Sweet. They've been great, helping me grow into an officer. I think to name any one specific person or these people, I think I've been blessed to have a lot of good people in my life, a lot of good friends. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I've been truly blessed to be able to surround myself with very influential people that have either taught me how to do it or how not to do it, and have done nothing but foster the wanting to learn more on how to do it better. I think everybody in that category serves me in that way.
Thank you, Brian, very much. I think there's about at least 11 other topics that I'm looking at on my right side of my screen that we haven't necessarily covered down on. So we'll have to figure out a way to get to that in the future. And maybe we can do a collab between you and Bart and Michelle, just from a Tailwinds Rants perspective, because I think one of the things that Cam and I just really try to work with people on and understand better is just the the mental health side of things. And I think that a lot of times we look at the military and try to address that from a stress perspective, post-traumatic stress type thing and whatnot. And then I wouldn't say we would completely forget about our first responders, but obviously the events that the actions and the qualifications that you've talked about are to respond properly to an event that is generally traumatic, right? It's traumatic for a structure and might potentially result in significant injury or loss of life. And that we know that affects you guys. And there's a lot of work, obviously, that Bart and Michelle both do to support not just the military, but the first responders. And I think that there's an opportunity there to address that and talk to that and understand that there are resources available for people like yourself, even though you're an exceptionally well-balanced human being who's achieved a great amount. There's people under your care that you're responsible for that those things affect. And I think that there's an opportunity there to address it a little bit further. But thank you, Brian, very much for your time. And we, of course, wish you a very happy Thanksgiving and holiday season going forward. And again, thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.